The blood on her hands was still warm when Emma Sinclair realized she had just saved a man's entire livelihood with nothing but instinct and determination. Emma had arrived in Wyatt, Missouri 3 weeks earlier, a 22-year-old woman fleeing the suffocating expectations of her Philadelphia family, who insisted she marry a banker twice her age. The year was 1881, and the frontier still held the promise of reinvention for those brave enough to seek it. She had taken a position as a schoolteacher in the small town nestled along the Missouri River, where cattle ranches sprawled across rolling hills, and the railroad brought just enough civilization to make life bearable. Her students were few, mostly children of ranchers and shopkeepers, but she poured herself into the work with a fervor that surprised even herself. That particular April morning had dawned crisp and clear, the kind of day that made Emma grateful she had chosen this rough-hewn life over the velvet prison of society ballrooms. She had been walking to the schoolhouse, her leather satchel heavy with books, when she heard the desperate shouts coming from the road ahead. A man on horseback was racing through town, his hat flying off as he pulled his horse to a skidding stop in front of the doctor's office. Emma paused, watching as he pounded on the door, his voice carrying across the quiet morning air. Doc Patterson, I need you now." The door opened, and old Doc Patterson emerged, still in his nightshirt despite the hour being well past 7. Emma could hear the exchange from where she stood, pretending to adjust her boot laces while she eavesdropped shamelessly. "My prize heifer is in trouble, Doc. She has been laboring since midnight and nothing is happening. I need the vet, but he is 3 towns over tending to an outbreak. You have got to help me. Son, I am a people doctor, not a veterinarian. I do not know the first thing about birthing calves. Please, Doc. This heifer represents my entire breeding program. If I lose her and the calf, I lose everything I have been working toward for 5 years. My whole season depends on this bloodline." The desperation in the man's voice made Emma's heart clench. She knew that tone, the sound of someone watching their dreams slip through their fingers. Before she could think better of it, she found herself walking toward them, her sensible boots clicking against the wooden sidewalk. "Excuse me," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "I could not help but overhear. I might be able to help." Both men turned to look at her, and for the first time, Emma got a good look at the rancher. He was tall, probably close to 6 feet, with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar and eyes the color of strong coffee. Dust covered his clothes, and exhaustion lined his face, but there was something striking about him, an intensity that made her breath catch. He could not have been much older than 26 or 27, she guessed. "Madam, I appreciate the offer, but this is not exactly proper work for a lady," he said, his Missouri drawl softening the words. Emma bristled. "I grew up spending summers on my uncle's farm in Pennsylvania. I have helped with difficult births before, both with cattle and horses. I am not squeamish and I am not afraid of hard work." Doc Patterson looked between them, then shrugged. "Ryan, it seems to me you do not have many options. Miss Sinclair here might be your best chance." Ryan, so that was his name. Ryan Xander, she would learn later, owner of the X-Bar Ranch 5 miles outside of town. He studied her for a long moment, taking in her practical calico dress and sturdy boots, the way she met his gaze without flinching. "Can you ride?" he asked finally. "Yes." "Then let us go." Every minute counts. Emma did not hesitate. She climbed onto the back of his horse when he offered his hand, settling behind the saddle and gripping his waist as he spurred the animal into a gallop. The ride to his ranch was a blur of spring countryside, flowering dogwoods and fresh green grass, the powerful muscles of the horse bunching beneath them as they flew across the dirt road. Emma had never been this close to a man who was not family, had never felt the solid warmth of a male body pressed against hers, and she tried very hard not to think about how her heart was racing for reasons that had nothing to do with the urgency of their mission. The X-Bar Ranch was modest but well-maintained, with a sturdy barn and several corrals holding horses and cattle. Ryan pulled his mount to a stop outside the barn and was off the horse before Emma could even catch her breath. He turned back to help her down, his hands firm on her waist, and for a moment their eyes met. Up close, she could see flecks of gold in his brown eyes, could smell the scent of leather and sage that clung to him. "This way," he said, releasing her perhaps a fraction of a second slower than necessary. Inside the barn, Emma found the heifer lying on her side in a bed of clean straw, her flanks heaving with exhaustion. The animal was beautiful, a rich red color with a white face, clearly well-bred stock. Emma immediately rolled up her sleeves and approached slowly, speaking in a low, soothing voice. "Hello there, sweet girl. Let us see what trouble you have gotten yourself into." Ryan handed her a bucket of clean water and soap without being asked, and Emma scrubbed her hands and arms thoroughly before beginning her examination. She had done this before, but never with so much riding on the outcome. Her uncle had taught her well during those long Pennsylvania summers, showing her how to read an animal's distress, how to feel for the position of the calf, how to know when to intervene and when to wait. "The calf is breech," she said after a careful examination, her voice calm despite the severity of the situation. "One front leg is back, which is why she cannot push it out. I need to reach in and reposition it." "Will that work?" Ryan asked, crouching beside her. His face was pale beneath the dust and stubble. "It has to," Emma said simply. "The alternative is losing them both." She saw him swallow hard, saw the way his jaw clenched. "What do you need me to do?" "Keep her calm, talk to her, let her know she is safe." What followed was the most intense hour of Emma's life. She worked carefully, her arm deep inside the heifer, feeling for the calf's leg while the animal groaned and shifted. Sweat poured down her face despite the cool morning air. Ryan stayed at the heifer's head, stroking her face and murmuring reassurances in that low Missouri drawl, and Emma found herself drawing strength from his steady presence. "I have it," she finally gasped, feeling the leg slide into proper position. "Both front legs are forward now." She should be able to push, and push the heifer did, with renewed vigor now that the obstruction was clear. Emma guided the calf as it emerged, first the nose, then the head, then the shoulders. With one final tremendous effort, the heifer delivered a perfect bull calf, wet and steaming in the cool morning air. Emma fell back onto the straw, exhausted and exhilarated, her arms aching and her dress ruined beyond repair. She watched as the calf took its first shuddering breath, as the mother immediately began licking it clean with her rough tongue. It was alive. They were both alive. Ryan was staring at her with an expression she could not quite read, something between awe and disbelief. He reached out and helped her to her feet, his hands gentle despite their calloused strength. "You saved my whole season," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "This calf and this heifer, they are the foundation of everything I have been trying to build. Without them, I would have had to start over from nothing." Emma smiled, suddenly shy under the intensity of his gaze. "I am just glad I could help. Just glad you could help," he repeated, shaking his head. "Miss Sinclair, you just performed a miracle in my barn. You saved 2 lives and my entire operation with them. I do not know how to thank you." "You could start by calling me Emma," she said, wiping her bloody hands on a rag he provided. "I think we are past formalities after that." A slow smile spread across his face, transforming him from exhausted rancher to something altogether more dangerous to her peace of mind. "Emma, and you should call me Ryan." The sun was climbing higher now, and Emma realized with a start that she had missed the opening of school. "Oh no, my students, I need to get back to town." "Let me clean up and hitch the wagon," Ryan said. "I'm not letting you ride back covered in birthing fluids. Besides, I need to stop by the general store anyway, and I owe you a proper thank you." While he prepared the wagon, Emma washed up as best she could at the pump outside the barn, grateful when Ryan's housekeeper, an older Mexican woman named Rosa, brought her a clean dress to wear. It was too large, clearly one of Rosa's, but it was better than arriving at the school looking like she had just performed ranch surgery. The ride back to town was different from the frantic race out to the ranch. Ryan drove the wagon at a leisurely pace, and they talked about everything and nothing. He told her about his dream of breeding the finest cattle in Missouri, about how he had saved for years to buy the heifer from a prestigious ranch in Texas. She told him about her flight from Philadelphia, about her overbearing family and her love of teaching children who actually wanted to learn. "So you ran away," he said, glancing at her with those perceptive eyes. "I prefer to think of it as choosing my own path," Emma replied. "There is a difference. Is there? Seems to me running towards something and running away from something else can look pretty similar from the outside." Emma considered this. "Perhaps, but the intention matters, does it not? I did not leave because I was afraid. I left because I wanted more than what was being offered to me. And have you found it? That more you were looking for?" She thought about the morning, about the feeling of bringing new life into the world, about the satisfaction of her teaching, about the way her heart had raced when Ryan's hands circled her waist. "I am beginning to think I might have." They arrived at the schoolhouse to find her students playing outside, supervised by Mrs. Henderson from the boarding house, who had apparently noticed Emma's absence and stepped in to help. The older woman took one look at Emma's borrowed dress and raised eyebrows, but Emma waved off her questions with promises to explain later. Ryan helped her down from the wagon, his hands lingering again on her waist. "Emma, would you allow me to take you to dinner tomorrow evening? To properly thank you for what you did today." Emma knew she should say no. She had been in Wyatt for less than a month. She barely knew this man. But when she looked into his eyes and saw the genuine warmth there, the respect and the beginnings of something deeper, she found herself nodding. "I would like that very much, Ryan." His smile was like sunrise breaking over the prairie. "I will pick you up at 6. Emma watched him drive away, then turned to face the inevitable questions from Mrs. Henderson and her curious students. But she could not stop smiling, even as she tried to explain why she had spent the morning delivering a calf instead of teaching arithmetic. That evening, after her students had gone home, and she had returned to her small room at the boarding house, Emma sat by the window and watched the sun set over the Missouri hills. Her hands were clean now, but she could still feel the memory of the work they had done, the life they had helped bring into the world. More than that, she could feel the ghost of Ryan's touch on her waist, the warmth of his body when she had ridden behind him, the way his eyes had softened when he looked at her. She had come west looking for freedom and found it in the classroom and the wide open spaces. But she had not expected to find this flutter of possibility, this sense that perhaps her real journey was just beginning. The next day passed in a blur of lessons and distracted thoughts. Emma found herself checking the clock more often than usual, watching as the hours crawled toward evening. Her students noticed her preoccupation, and more than once she had to apologize for losing track of what she was teaching. When 3 o'clock finally came and the children scattered to their homes, Emma raced back to the boarding house to prepare. She had brought few dresses from Philadelphia, but she had one nice one in deep green that she had never worn in Wyatt. She put it on now, arranging her dark blonde hair in a simple style that was both elegant and practical. Mrs. Henderson knocked on her door just as she was fastening her mother's pearl earrings. "So you are stepping out with Ryan Xander," the older woman said, her eyes twinkling. "He is a good man, Emma. Hard-working, honest, keeps to himself mostly, lost his parents to fever when he was 20 and has been running that ranch alone ever since." "It is just dinner," Emma protested, but even she could hear how weak the argument sounded. "If you say so, dear." "But I have seen the way he looks at you, and I saw your face when he drove away yesterday. Just dinner does not put that kind of light in a person's eyes." Emma did not know how to respond to that, so she simply smiled and accepted Mrs. Henderson's blessing as the older woman headed back downstairs. When the knock came at 6 o'clock precisely, Emma took a deep breath before descending to meet Ryan. He had cleaned up remarkably well. Gone were the dusty work clothes, replaced by dark trousers, a white shirt, and a vest that emphasized his broad shoulders. His hair was neatly combed, his jaw freshly shaved, and when he saw her coming down the stairs, his expression made Emma grateful for the banister to hold on to. "You look beautiful," he said simply, offering his arm. "Thank you. You clean up rather well yourself." He took her to the nicest restaurant in Wyatt, which was not saying much given the town's size, but the food was good and the atmosphere was cozy. Over roast beef and potatoes, they continued the conversation they had started the day before, but now it went deeper. Ryan told her about his childhood, about growing up on a ranch and knowing from his earliest memories that this life was what he wanted. He spoke about his parents with affection and lingering grief, about the responsibility of carrying on their legacy alone. "I have a younger sister," he admitted. "Sarah. She is 19 now, married to a shopkeeper in Kansas City. After our parents died, I insisted she go live with our aunt in the city, get an education, have chances she would not have had stuck out here with me. She writes regularly, seems happy. But sometimes I wonder if I pushed her away because it was better for her or because I did not want her to see me struggle." Emmer reached across the table and touched his hand. "You gave her a choice and a chance. That is more than many brothers would do. You should be proud of that." His fingers curled around hers, warm and strong. "What about you? Any siblings you left behind in Philadelphia? 2 older brothers, both married with children, and a younger sister, Catherine, who is 17 and completely enamored with the social season. She thinks I am insane for leaving." Emma paused, then added honestly, "We were close once, but we have grown apart. She cannot understand why I would give up comfort and security for uncertainty." "And can you understand why she wants those things?" The question was surprisingly insightful. Emma considered it carefully. "I can understand wanting safety, but I think there are different kinds of security. The kind my family offered came with so many strings attached that I would have been trapped. Out here, I might have less material comfort, but I have something more valuable. I have the freedom to make my own choices. Even if those choices lead you to stick your arm inside a cow at dawn," Ryan asked, his eyes crinkling with amusement. Emma laughed. "Especially then. Do you know how exhilarating it was to do something real, something that mattered? In Philadelphia, my days were filled with meaningless social calls and embroidery. Here, I taught 6 children how to read yesterday, and today I saved a life. 2 lives, actually. That is worth more than all the tea parties in Pennsylvania." The admiration in Ryan's eyes was unmistakable. "You are not like any woman I have ever met, Emma Sinclair. Is that a good thing? It is an extraordinary thing." They talked until the restaurant owner began pointedly stacking chairs, then walked slowly back toward the boarding house. The spring evening was perfect, warm enough to be comfortable but cool enough to be pleasant, with a sky full of stars that seemed impossibly bright after the gas-lit haze of Philadelphia. "How is the calf doing?" Emma asked as they walked. "Thriving." "He is already standing and nursing like he was born to it, which I suppose he was," Ryan chuckled. "I named him Miracle, seemed appropriate. And the mother, she is doing wonderfully. Rosa has been keeping an eye on her, but there have been no complications, thanks to you." He stopped walking and turned to face her. "Emma, I meant what I said yesterday. You saved everything I have been working toward, but more than that, you did not hesitate. You saw someone in need and you stepped forward without thinking about propriety or your own comfort. That takes courage." Emma felt her cheeks warm. Anyone would have done the same. "No," Ryan said firmly. "They would not have. Most people would have kept walking. You are special, Emma. I knew it the moment you offered to help, and everything since then has only confirmed it." They had reached the boarding house now, and Emma knew she should go inside. It was already later than was strictly proper, and Mrs. Henderson would be listening for her return, but she did not want this evening to end. "Ryan, I had a wonderful time tonight. So did I. Would you allow me to call on you again? Perhaps on Sunday after church. I could show you more of the ranch, introduce you properly to Miracle and his mother." "I would like that very much." He lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles that sent shivers up her arm. "Until Sunday then, Miss Emma." She floated up to her room, barely registering Mrs. Henderson's knowing smile as she passed. That night, Emma lay in bed replaying every moment of the evening, from the way Ryan had looked at her to the warmth of his hand holding hers. She had not come west looking for romance, but it seemed to have found her anyway. Sunday arrived after what felt like the longest 3 days of Emma's life. She wore her green dress again, since it was her best, and met Ryan outside the church after the service. Several townspeople noticed them leaving together, and Emma was aware of the whispers and speculative glances. In a town the size of Wyatt, nothing remained private for long. The ride out to the ranch was pleasant, And this time Emma sat beside Ryan on the wagon seat rather than clinging to his back on horseback. They talked easily, the conversation flowing as naturally as the creek that ran alongside the road. When they arrived at the X-Bar, Rosa greeted them with warm smiles and fresh lemonade, clearly approving of her employer's choice of companion. Ryan led Emma to the barn where Miracle and his mother were housed. The calf had indeed thrived in the past few days, growing visibly stronger and more confident. He trotted over to investigate Emma with curious dark eyes, and she laughed in delight as he snuffled at her hand with his soft nose. "He knows you," Ryan said, leaning against the stall door. "Animals can sense these things. He knows you helped him into this world." Emma stroked the calf's russet coat, marveling at how healthy he looked. "He is perfect, Ryan. You should be very proud." "I am, but my pride does not come close to my gratitude." He moved closer, close enough that Emma could feel the warmth radiating from him. "Emma, I know we have known each other less than a week. I know this might seem too fast, but I have to be honest with you about what I am feeling." Emma's heart began to race. "What are you feeling?" "Like I have been waiting my whole life for you to walk into it. Like that morning when I was desperate, and you stepped forward without hesitation was not just chance but fate. Like I want to know everything about you and spend every moment I can in your company." He paused, his brown eyes searching hers. "Am I alone in feeling this way?" "No," Emma whispered. "You are not alone." Ryan's hand came up to cup her cheek, his thumb brushing gently across her skin. "May I kiss you, Emma?" she answered by rising on her toes and pressing her lips to his. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, but it quickly deepened into something more passionate. Emma's hands clutched at Ryan's vest, pulling him closer, and his arms wrapped around her waist, holding her as if she was something precious and breakable. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. "That was," Ryan began, then seemed to lose the words. "Yes," Emma agreed. "It was." They spent the rest of the afternoon exploring the ranch. Ryan showed her his plans for expanding the herd, his hopes for building a house that would rival any in the county. He introduced her to his horses, including the mare he had been training for his sister's next visit. Emma found herself envisioning a future here, found herself imagining waking up to these views every morning, building a life alongside this earnest, hard-working man who looked at her like she hung the moon. As the sun began to set, and Ryan prepared to drive her back to town, Emma realized something important. She had come to Missouri running from a future she did not want. But now, standing in the golden light of a prairie evening with Ryan's arm around her shoulders, she was running toward something instead, toward possibility, toward love. The next few weeks passed in a blur of courtship and discovery. Ryan came to town whenever his work allowed, which was often since spring was a relatively light time on a cattle ranch. He would arrive in the late afternoon and help Emma grade papers, his large hands incongruous with the delicate pencil marks. They would have dinner together, sometimes at the restaurant, but more often on simple picnics by the river. On Sundays, Emma would visit the ranch, and Rosa would prepare elaborate meals while casting approving glances at the two of them. Emma learned that Ryan was unfailingly patient with his animals, quick to laugh, and surprisingly well-read for a man who had spent most of his life working cattle. He kept a small collection of books in his modest ranch house, everything from Shakespeare to agricultural journals. She learned that he sang while he worked, that he had a talent for woodworking, and that he was fiercely protective of those he cared about. Ryan learned that Emma was stubborn and independent, that she had a wicked sense of humor hidden beneath her proper schoolteacher demeanor, and that she was utterly fearless when it mattered. He learned about her childhood, about her mother who had died when Emma was 15, about her father who had never quite known what to do with a daughter who asked too many questions and refused to fit into the mold society had prepared for her. They also learned with increasing certainty that they were falling in love. It was not always easy. Emma's position as the town schoolteacher came with expectations of propriety that their courtship sometimes strained. More than once, Mrs. Henderson had to defend Emma's reputation to the more conservative townswomen who thought she was being too forward. And Ryan's dedication to his ranch meant that sometimes days would pass without them seeing each other, particularly as summer approached and his work increased. But through it all, they were building something solid, something real. In late June, Ryan asked Emma to come to the ranch on a Saturday, which was unusual since that was typically a work day for him. She arrived to find him pacing in front of the barn, clearly nervous about something. "Ryan, what is wrong? Is it Miracle, the heifer?" No, everyone is fine." He ran a hand through his hair, making it stand up in a way that Emma found endearing. "Emma, I need to tell you something, and I need you to be honest with me about how you feel." Emma's stomach clenched with worry. "Of course, what is it?" "I have been offered a contract. A big one. There is a rancher in Texas who wants to buy breeding stock from my herd based on Miracle's bloodline. It is more money than I have ever seen in my life, enough to expand the ranch significantly, to build that house I told you about, to finally feel secure in what I am building here." "Ryan, that is wonderful," Emma exclaimed. "Why do you look so worried?" "Because it means I will have to go to Texas for at least 3 weeks, possibly a month. I will have to select the cattle, supervise the transport, negotiate the details, and I hate the thought of being away from you for that long." He took her hands in his. "But more than that, I hate that I am making plans for the future without knowing if you see yourself in it. Emma, before I go to Texas, before I make these big decisions about expanding the ranch and building a bigger house, I need to know, do you see a future here? With me?" Emma's breath caught. They had been courting for 2 months, which by frontier standards was not particularly short, but they had never explicitly discussed the future. Now, looking into Ryan's earnest face, she realized that she had been afraid to hope for too much, afraid that wanting something this badly would somehow make it disappear. "Yes," she said simply. "I see a future here, with you. I think I have seen it since the day I helped Miracle be born." The relief on Ryan's face was palpable. He pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly. "I am going to do this right, Emma. I am going to go to Texas, secure our future, and when I come back, I am going to ask you properly with a ring and everything. Can you wait for me?" "Of course I can wait for you," Emma said, tears pricking her eyes. "Just come back safely." "I promise, I will write every day, and Emma," he pulled back to look at her, "I love you. I know I should probably wait to say that until I have a ring to offer you, but I cannot go away for a month without telling you. I love you more than I thought it was possible to love someone." "I love you too," Emma whispered, "so much that it scares me sometimes." They spent the rest of the day together, trying to memorize every detail of each other. Rosa packed them a picnic, and they rode out to a bluff overlooking the Missouri River where the view stretched for miles. They talked about everything and nothing, made plans and shared dreams, and kissed until they were both dizzy with it. When Ryan took Emma back to town that evening, the goodbye was bittersweet. He was leaving in 2 days, early Monday morning, and they both knew it would be hard. "I will be back before you know it," Ryan promised, holding her close. "And when I return, everything will be different, better." Emma nodded against his chest, breathing in the scent of him, leather and sage and sunshine. "Just be safe, that is all I ask." The next day was Sunday, and they attended church together, sitting in the back pew with their shoulders touching. After the service, they spent one more afternoon at the ranch, and this time Ryan gave her a tour of the land where he wanted to build their house. It was a beautiful spot, on a rise that overlooked the creek and caught the sunset perfectly. "I am thinking a big porch," he said, standing behind her with his arms around her waist as they surveyed the site, "where we can sit in the evenings and watch the stars. And a large kitchen, because I know you like to cook, and enough bedrooms for—" He stopped, suddenly shy. "For what?" Emma prompted, turning in his arms to look up at him. "For children," he said quietly. "If you want them, I know we have not talked about this, but I want a family, Emma. I want children running around this ranch, learning to ride and help with the cattle. I want to build something that lasts beyond just me." Emma's heart swelled. "I want that too, I want all of it." They sealed the promise with a kiss, standing on the empty plot of land that would someday be their home. Monday morning came too soon. Emma was at the ranch before dawn to see Ryan off. He had arranged for his neighbor, an older rancher named Jack Collins, to check on the property while he was gone, and Rosa would continue to live in the small cabin near the barn and tend to the animals. Everything was prepared, but that did not make the leaving any easier. 3 weeks, Ryan said, holding Emma's hands as his packed wagon stood ready. 4 at the most. I will write every chance I get. I will be counting the days, Emma said, determined not to cry even though her throat was tight with unshed tears. One more kiss, long and deep and full of promise, and then Ryan was climbing onto the wagon seat. Emma stood watching as he drove away, his hand raised in farewell until he disappeared over the hill. Then she finally let the tears come, standing in the dusty ranch yard with the sunrise painting the sky pink and gold. The days without Ryan were strange. Emma threw herself into her work, planning lessons for the fall term that would begin in September and helping some of the younger children with summer reading. She visited the ranch twice a week to check on Miracle and the other animals, and Rosa always had fresh cookies and kind words. But the nights were long, and Emma found herself staring out her window at the stars, wondering if Ryan was looking at the same sky in Texas. True to his word, Ryan wrote every day. His letters arrived in batches, sometimes 3 or 4 at once when the mail stage came through. Emma treasured each one, reading them over and over until she had them memorized. He wrote about the journey, about the towns he passed through, about the heat of the Texas plains. He wrote about the rancher he was dealing with, a shrewd but fair man who was impressed with Miracle's bloodline. And he wrote about missing her, about thinking of her constantly, about the future they would build together. Emma wrote back just as faithfully, telling him about her students, about the changes in town, about her visits to the ranch. She told him about her dreams, about how she had started sketching designs for the house, about how Rosa was teaching her to make proper tortillas and Mexican wedding cookies. She told him, over and over, that she loved him and was waiting for him. 3 weeks passed, then 4. Emma tried not to worry as the letters continued to arrive, but Ryan did not. She knew business negotiations could be complicated, that unforeseen delays were common. But still, she found herself checking the road every evening, hoping to see his wagon coming over the hill. It was a Tuesday afternoon in late July, sweltering and humid in the way that Missouri summers could be, when Emma was leaving the schoolhouse after a tutoring session and saw a wagon coming down the main street. Her heart leaped before her mind could catch up, and then she was running, actually running in a way that would have scandalized her Philadelphia family, her skirts hiked up and her hair coming loose from its pins. Ryan saw her coming and jumped down from the wagon before it had fully stopped, catching her as she launched herself into his arms. They stood in the middle of the street, holding each other and laughing and crying, completely uncaring of the spectacle they were making. "You are back," Emma said unnecessarily, her face pressed against his chest. "You are finally back. I am sorry it took so long." The negotiations were more complex than expected, and then there was a delay with the bank transfers, and then I had to wait for something to arrive, and he stopped himself. "None of that matters now. I am home, and I have so much to tell you." They walked to the boarding house, arms around each other, and sat on the porch while Ryan told her about Texas. The deal had been even better than he hoped. He had sold breeding rights to Miracle's bloodline for a sum that made Emma's eyes widen, with a contract for additional sales over the next 5 years. It was enough money to transform the X-Bar Ranch from a modest operation to a significant one. "But that is not all," Ryan said, his eyes bright with excitement. "I found something else while I was there, a horse breeder who is retiring and selling his stock. Emma, these are some of the finest horses in the West. I used part of the money from the cattle deal to buy 6 mares and a stallion. They are being shipped and should arrive next month. I am going to start breeding horses alongside the cattle." "Ryan, that is incredible. It is more than I ever dreamed possible, and it is all because you saved Miracle. That morning changed everything, Emma. You changed everything." He stood up suddenly, pulling her to her feet. "Come with me. There is something I need to do, and I cannot wait another minute." They walked to the edge of town, to the little church where they had sat together every Sunday. The evening light was golden, filtering through the trees and painting everything in warm tones. Ryan led Emma to a quiet spot beside the church, where wildflowers grew in profusion and the view opened up across the river valley. "Emma Sinclair," he said, taking both her hands in his. "2 months ago, you walked into my life and saved not just my cattle but my entire future. You did it without hesitation, without expecting anything in return, because that is who you are. You are brave and strong and kind and brilliant, and I have loved you from almost the first moment I saw you. These past weeks without you have been torture. Every beautiful thing I saw I wanted to share with you. Every success I had, you were the first person I wanted to tell. And every night I fell asleep missing you and woke up missing you more." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Emma's breath caught as he opened it to reveal a gold ring with a small but perfect diamond. "I bought this in Texas, and it is the reason I was delayed an extra 3 days because I had to wait for the jeweler to size it. Emma, I know we have only known each other a few months. I know this is fast. But out here, we do not have the luxury of years-long courtships. Life is hard and uncertain, and when you find something real, something true, you hold on to it with both hands." He dropped to one knee, looking up at her with those warm brown eyes. "Emma Sinclair, will you marry me? Will you build a life with me at the X-Bar Ranch? Will you let me spend every day for the rest of my life trying to make you as happy as you have made me?" Emma was crying openly now, tears streaming down her face as she nodded. "Yes," she managed to say. "Yes, Ryan, I will marry you. I will build a life with you. I will spend every day loving you. Yes." Ryan stood and slipped the ring onto her finger, and then they were kissing, pouring all the longing and love and relief of the past weeks into it. When they finally broke apart, both were laughing and crying at once. "I need to do this properly," Ryan said, wiping tears from Emma's cheeks with his thumbs. "I should ask your father's permission. My father is in Philadelphia and has no say over my life anymore," Emma said firmly. "But if it makes you feel better, you can ask Mrs. Henderson. She is the closest thing I have to family here." As it turned out, Mrs. Henderson was delighted, as was most of the town. The news of their engagement spread quickly, and suddenly, Emma found herself the center of attention in a way she had never been before. The women of Wyatt rallied around her, offering to help with wedding preparations, sharing recipes and sewing patterns. It was overwhelming but also touching, this immediate acceptance into the community. They set the wedding date for late September, after Emma's school term was well established and after Ryan's new horses arrived. It gave them 2 months to prepare, and Emma used the time to finish the school year strong and to work with Ryan on plans for their house. With his new financial security, Ryan hired a crew to begin construction immediately, and the house began to rise on the bluff overlooking the creek. Emma spent her weekends at the ranch, helping where she could and watching their dream take physical form. The house was beautiful, built from native stone and timber, with the big porch Ryan had promised and large windows that let in the light. Rosa was already planning where to plant gardens, and Ryan was designing a barn that would house both the cattle breeding operation and his new horse venture. The horses arrived in mid-August, and they were even more magnificent than Ryan had described. The mares were sleek and intelligent, with bloodlines that traced back to Spanish stock, and the stallion was a powerful bay that immediately became the pride of the ranch. Emma watched as Ryan worked with them, patient and firm, earning their trust. He had a gift with animals, she realized, the same patience and steadiness that had made her fall in love with him. As September approached, Emma made the difficult decision to resign from her teaching position. It was not an easy choice. She loved teaching, loved her students. But the ranch was 5 miles from town, too far for a daily commute, and she knew that building a life with Ryan would be a full-time endeavor, especially once they started having children. The school board found a replacement, a young man from Kansas City who seemed capable if a bit overwhelmed by the frontier. Emma spent her last weeks teaching him her methods and introducing him to the students and their families. On her final day, the children presented her with a hand-drawn picture of her helping Miracle be born, and Emma had to excuse herself to cry in private. The week before the wedding was a whirlwind. Emma's sister Catherine surprised her by traveling all the way from Philadelphia, accompanied by an aunt. Their arrival was shocking, and the reunion was tearful. Catherine had changed, seemed less concerned with society and more interested in really talking to Emma for the first time in years. "I read your letters," Catherine said the night before the wedding as they sat up late in Emma's boarding house room. "Every single one, and I realized that you were right to leave. You are glowing, Emma. You are happier than I have ever seen you. This Ryan must be quite a man." "He is," Emma said simply. "He sees me, Catherine, not who he wants me to be or who society says I should be, but who I actually am, and he loves me for it." "Then I am glad you found him," Catherine said, squeezing her sister's hand, "even if it means you are 1,000 miles away." The wedding day dawned clear and perfect, with that special quality of light that only comes in early autumn. The ceremony was held at the church, with most of the town in attendance. Emma wore a dress of ivory silk that Mrs. Henderson and Rosa had helped her sew, with her mother's pearls at her throat. Ryan wore a new suit, his dark hair neatly combed, and when Emma walked down the aisle on her aunt's arm and saw him waiting at the altar, she thought her heart might burst from happiness. The vows were traditional, but when Ryan said, "I do," his voice was strong and sure, and when Emma replied in kind, she felt the weight and promise of the words. They were binding their lives together, promising to face whatever came as partners. It was terrifying and exhilarating all at once. The reception was held at the ranch, with tables set up in the yard and food prepared by half the women in town. There was music and dancing, and Emma danced with Ryan until her feet hurt, and then danced some more. At sunset, they stood on their new porch and watched the sky turn orange and pink and purple, and Emma thought that nothing in her life had ever felt so perfectly right. Their wedding night was tender and sweet, both of them nervous despite their love. Ryan was gentle and patient, and Emma marveled at the intimacy of it, at being this close to another person, at the vulnerability and trust it required. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the big bed Ryan had built himself, and Emma traced patterns on his chest while he played with her hair. "Are you happy?" Ryan asked softly. "So happy I cannot even find words for it," Emma replied. "Are you happier than I ever knew was possible? When I think about that morning when I rode into town desperate for help, and you stepped forward, it feels like the hand of God putting us in each other's paths." "Or fate," Emma suggested. "Or fate," Ryan agreed. He kissed the top of her head. "Either way, I am grateful. I love you, Emma Xander." Emma smiled at the sound of her new name. "I love you too." The first months of marriage were an adjustment, as Emma learned to run a ranch household and Ryan learned to share his space and decisions with another person. They had their disagreements, usually about small things like where to store the preserves or whether to invest in more cattle or more horses. But they learned quickly how to fight fair, how to listen to each other, and how to compromise. Emma discovered that she loved ranch life more than she had expected. She took over much of the horse training, finding that she had a natural talent for it. The mares responded to her gentle patience, and by Christmas, 2 of them were pregnant. She also continued to help with difficult animal births when needed, earning a reputation among neighboring ranchers as someone who could be called on in an emergency. Ryan, in turn, supported Emma's continued passion for teaching. He helped her set up a small schoolroom in their house, and twice a week, children from neighboring ranches would come for lessons. It was not the same as having her own school, but it allowed her to continue doing work she loved while building her life with Ryan. Their first Christmas as a married couple was simple, but perfect. Ryan surprised Emma with a beautiful saddle hand-tooled with her initials. Emma gave him a set of breeding journals she had painstakingly compiled, documenting every detail of Miracle's lineage and the development of their herd. They spent the holiday with Rosa and a few neighboring families, and Emma felt the warmth of belonging in a way she never had in Philadelphia's grand but cold holiday celebrations. In February, Emma realized she was pregnant. The morning sickness had started subtly, and at first she attributed it to something she had eaten. But when it continued day after day and her monthly cycle failed to arrive, she knew. The realization filled her with joy and terror in equal measure. She told Ryan that evening after dinner. He had been going over accounts at the kitchen table, and she came up behind him and wrapped her arms around his shoulders. "Ryan, I have something to tell you." Something in her tone made him turn around immediately, his eyes searching her face. "What is it? Are you all right?" "I am fine." "Better than fine." "Ryan, I am pregnant. We are going to have a baby." For a moment, Ryan just stared at her, as if his mind was having trouble processing the words. Then his face broke into the biggest smile Emma had ever seen. He stood so quickly that his chair fell over, pulling her into his arms and lifting her off the ground. "A baby," he said, laughing. "Emma, we are going to have a baby." "Careful," Emma protested, but she was laughing too. "You have to be gentle now. There are two of us to think about." Ryan set her down carefully, then immediately dropped to his knees and pressed his ear against her still flat stomach. "Can you hear anything?" "Not yet, you fool. It is far too early for that." But Ryan stayed there for a long moment, his hands gentle on her waist, his face full of wonder. When he looked up at her, his eyes were wet. "I am going to be a father." "You are going to be a wonderful father," Emma corrected, running her fingers through his hair. "Our child is so lucky." The pregnancy progressed smoothly, though Emma found the summer heat oppressive as her belly grew. Ryan was attentive to the point of being overbearing, constantly worried that she was working too hard or not resting enough. Emma bore his hovering with good humor, understanding that it came from love and excitement. They prepared the nursery in one of the upstairs rooms, painting it a sunny yellow and filling it with a cradle Ryan built himself. Rosa knitted blankets and booties, and the women from town organized a quilting bee to make a beautiful baby quilt. Emma's sister Catherine wrote regularly, sending baby clothes and toys, and expressing regret that she could not travel to Missouri for the birth. As Emma's due date in early October approached, Ryan became increasingly nervous. He had dealt with hundreds of animal births, but the thought of Emma in labor terrified him. He made her promise to send for the doctor at the first sign that the baby was coming, even though Doc Patterson lived in town and it would take time to fetch him. The labor began on a cool October evening, almost exactly a year after that morning when Emma had helped Miracle be born. Emma's water broke while she was making dinner, and she calmly sent Ryan to fetch the doctor while Rosa helped her to bed. By the time Ryan returned with Doc Patterson, the contractions were coming regularly. The labor was long and difficult. Emma had helped countless animals give birth, but she had never fully appreciated the mother's experience until now. The pain was intense, wave after wave that seemed to consume her entire world. But Ryan stayed by her side through all of it, holding her hand, wiping her forehead, murmuring encouragement. Rosa and Doc Patterson provided medical support, but it was Ryan's presence that gave Emma strength. As dawn broke on October 3, 1882, Emma gave birth to a healthy baby boy. The moment she heard his first cry, all the pain and exhaustion vanished, replaced by a love so fierce and immediate that it took her breath away. Doc Patterson placed the baby on her chest, and Emma looked down at the tiny, perfect face, the dark hair, the small fists waving in the air. "We have a son," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. Ryan was crying too, unashamedly, as he looked at his child for the first time. "He is perfect, Emma. You are perfect. I cannot believe he is ours." They named him Robert Thomas Xander, after Ryan's father and Emma's uncle. From the first moment, he was the center of their world. Ryan took to fatherhood with the same dedication he brought to everything else, learning to change diapers and give bottles when Emma needed rest. He would walk the floor with Robert in the middle of the night, singing the same songs he sang to his horses, and Emma would watch from the bed with her heart full to bursting. The ranch continued to thrive. Miracle's offspring were in high demand, and Ryan's horse breeding operation was gaining recognition throughout Missouri and beyond. They hired help as needed, but Ryan insisted on staying hands-on with the breeding program, and Emma continued to assist with the difficult births and the horse training. Robert grew from infant to toddler, proving to be a happy, curious child. He took his first steps in the barn, encouraged by Miracle, who had become as gentle as a lamb around the child. By the time Robert was 2, he was riding in front of Ryan on horseback, squealing with delight, and Emma could already see the rancher he would become. In the spring of 1884, Emma discovered she was pregnant again. This time, the pregnancy was easier, perhaps because she knew what to expect. Their daughter, Eleanor May, was born in December of that year, arriving quickly and with much less drama than her brother. She had Emma's light hair and Ryan's brown eyes, and from the beginning, she was determined and strong-willed. Life fell into a rhythm that was busy but deeply satisfying. The ranch required constant work, but it was the kind of work that built something lasting. Emma taught both her children to read and write, started teaching neighbor children again, and continued to work with the horses. Ryan expanded the operation carefully, always mindful of sustainability, always thinking about the legacy they were building for their children. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Ryan took Emma back to the bluff where he had proposed. Rosa watched the children, giving them a rare evening alone. They sat on a blanket watching the sunset, much as they had done on their wedding day. "Do you ever regret it?" Ryan asked, his arm around her shoulders. "Leaving Philadelphia, giving up the comfortable life you could have had." Emma turned to look at him, at his face that had become even more dear to her with each passing year. "Not for a single moment." "Ryan, you gave me everything I was looking for, even though I did not know what that was when I came here. You gave me purpose and partnership and passion. You gave me children and a home and a life that matters. How could I ever regret that?" "I just want to make sure you are happy," Ryan said. "That is all I have ever wanted." "I am happy," Emma said firmly. "So happy that sometimes I have to pinch myself to make sure this is real. Do you remember that morning when you rode into town desperate for help? How could I forget? It was the most important day of my life." "Mine too. I thought I was just helping a man with a difficult birth. I had no idea I was meeting my future, my partner, my love." She took his hand and placed it over her heart. "You saved me just as much as I saved Miracle. You gave me a reason to stop running and start building." They watched the sun sink below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and purple. In the distance, they could hear Eleanor's laughter and Robert's excited shouts as they played with Rosa. Somewhere in the barn, Miracle lowed contentedly, surrounded by the offspring that had made the X-Bar Ranch's reputation. "What are you thinking about?" Ryan asked. "About how far we have come. About how that one moment, that one decision to step forward and offer help, changed everything. About how love can grow from the most unexpected places." "I love you, Emma Xander," Ryan said, pulling her close. "More today than yesterday and less than I will tomorrow." "I love you too," Emma replied, "always and forever." The years continued to pass, bringing both challenges and triumphs. There were drought years when they had to carefully manage water and feed. There were seasons when illness swept through the herd, and they worked day and night to save what they could. There were moments of heartbreak, like when they lost Rosa to pneumonia in the winter of 1887, and moments of joy, like when Robert won his first junior rodeo competition at age 8. But through it all, Emma and Ryan faced everything together, their partnership growing stronger with each obstacle overcome. They added 2 more children to their family, another son named William and a daughter named Alice. The house they had built together rang with the sound of children's laughter, with music and conversation and life. Emma never lost her love of teaching. As her children grew, she opened a proper school on the ranch, taking in children from all the surrounding properties. Ryan built her a dedicated schoolhouse, and Emma threw herself into the work with renewed passion. She taught reading and writing and arithmetic, but also practical skills like animal husbandry and basic veterinary care. Many of her students went on to successful ranching careers of their own, and they always credited Mrs. Xander with giving them the foundation they needed. Ryan's breeding programs became legendary. Miracle lived to the impressive age of 15, producing offspring that were sought after across the western states. The horse breeding operation flourished as well, and by 1890, the X-Bar Ranch was one of the most respected ranching operations in Missouri. But Ryan never lost sight of what mattered most. He would leave the most important business meeting to attend his children's school performances, would put aside the most pressing ranch work to spend time with Emma. On their 20th wedding anniversary in 1902, their children, now grown or nearly so, organized a celebration. Friends and neighbors came from miles around to honor the couple who had built not just a successful ranch, but a genuine partnership. As Emma looked around at the gathering, at her children healthy and strong, at Ryan's hand warm in hers, at the ranch they had built together, she felt a profound sense of gratitude. Robert, now 20 years old and running much of the ranch operation himself, stood to make a toast. "Mom and Dad, I have watched you my whole life, and you have shown me what real love looks like. It is not just the romance, though you still sneak kisses when you think we are not looking." Laughter rippled through the crowd. "It is the way you work together, the way you support each other, the way you face every challenge as a team. You have built something incredible here, not just in terms of the ranch, but in terms of family and community. We are all better for knowing you and learning from you." Emma dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief as the crowd applauded. Ryan squeezed her hand, and she turned to see him looking at her with the same warmth and love she had seen in his eyes 20 years earlier, when she had stepped forward to help a desperate cowboy with a dying heifer. Later that evening, after the guests had gone home and the children were in bed, Emma and Ryan walked out to the barn to check on the animals one last time. It was a ritual they had maintained throughout their marriage, this quiet time at the end of the day when they could be alone together. Miracle's great-great-granddaughter stood in the stall that had once housed him, her own calf nursing contentedly beside her. Emma ran her hand along the heifer's sleek coat, marveling at how the bloodline continued. "Do you remember?" she asked Ryan softly. "Every detail," he replied, coming to stand behind her and wrapping his arms around her waist. "I remember being terrified. I remember thinking I was going to lose everything. And then this brave, beautiful woman stepped forward and saved not just my cattle, but my entire future." "You saved my whole season," Emma quoted, smiling at the memory. "That is what you said to me." "I was wrong," Ryan said, turning her to face him. "You did not save just one season. You saved my whole life. You gave me everything I have, everything I am. You are my partner, my love, my best friend. And I would relive every moment, the struggles and the triumphs, just to end up here with you." Emma reached up to cup his face, her thumb brushing across his cheek. His hair was starting to gray at the temples now, and there were lines around his eyes that had not been there when they met. But to her, he was as handsome as ever, maybe more so because now she could see their life together written in those lines, in the strength of his hands and the warmth of his gaze. "I love you, Ryan Xander," she said. "From that very first moment when you looked at me with desperate hope in your eyes, to right now, to every moment that is still to come. You are my home, my heart, my everything." They kissed there in the barn, surrounded by the animals they had raised and the legacy they had built, and it felt like coming full circle. That desperate morning 21 years ago had been the beginning of everything. One act of kindness, one moment of courage, one decision to step forward instead of walking away, and it had blossomed into a lifetime of love. As they walked back to the house hand in hand, Emma looked up at the stars and thought about the journey that had brought her here. She had left Philadelphia searching for freedom and found so much more. She had found purpose in teaching, satisfaction in ranching, joy in motherhood. But most of all, she had found love with a good man who saw her for who she truly was and loved her not in spite of her independence and strength, but because of it. The house was dark except for a single lamp left burning in the window, a beacon welcoming them home. Robert had moved into his own cabin on the property the year before, preparing to take over more of the ranch operations. Eleanor was away at teacher's college, following in her mother's footsteps. William and Alice were asleep upstairs, still young enough to be tucked in at night. Ryan and Emma climbed the stairs to their bedroom, the house creaking comfortably around them. They prepared for bed with the easy familiarity of 20 years together, and when they finally lay down, Emma curled into Ryan's side with a contented sigh. "Happy anniversary, my love," Ryan whispered into her hair. "Happy anniversary," Emma replied. "Here is to 20 more years and 20 more after that." "I will take every year you will give me," Ryan said. "Every day, every moment." Emma drifted off to sleep with a smile on her face, secure in Ryan's arms, surrounded by the life they had built together. Outside, the Missouri night was peaceful. The ranch quiet except for the occasional sound of cattle lowing or horses shifting in their stalls. Somewhere in that barn, Miracle's legacy continued in the form of healthy, thriving cattle that bore his bloodline. And in the house on the bluff, in the big bed that Ryan had built with his own hands, two people who had found each other in the most unexpected way slept wrapped in each other's arms, their love as strong and true as the day they had pledged their lives to one another. The years that followed continued to bring blessings. Emma and Ryan welcomed grandchildren as their older children married and started families of their own. Robert married a rancher's daughter from the next county, and they settled in the cabin on the X-Bar property, working the ranch alongside Ryan. Eleanor became a teacher just like her mother, eventually returning to Wyatt to take over the school Emma had once run. William studied veterinary medicine and returned to practice in the area, finally giving the region the trained animal doctor it had always needed. Alice, their youngest, showed a talent for breeding horses and took over that side of the operation entirely. Emma and Ryan aged gracefully together, their hair turning silver, their bodies moving a bit slower, but their love never diminishing. They remained partners in every sense, still working side by side when they could, still stealing quiet moments together, still looking at each other with the warmth and affection that had characterized their relationship from the beginning. On a warm spring day in 1915, 33 years after they had married, Emma and Ryan sat on their porch watching their grandchildren play in the yard. Robert's 3 boys were trying to rope a practice steer, while Eleanor's twin girls supervised with the authoritative air of 8-year-olds. William's infant son slept peacefully in Emma's arms, and Alice's daughter toddled around exploring everything she could reach. "We did well," Ryan said softly, reaching over to take Emma's free hand. "We did," Emma agreed. "Better than I ever dreamed possible." "Do you ever think about that morning, when I rode into town desperate and you stepped forward?" Emma smiled. "I think about it often. How could I not? It was the moment my real life began." "Mine too," Ryan said. He lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles just as he had done decades before. "You saved my whole season, Emma Xander, and then you saved every season after that." Emma leaned her head on his shoulder, watching the sun paint the sky in shades of gold and pink. The ranch stretched out before them, prosperous and thriving, a testament to their hard work and dedication. But more than that, it was a testament to their love, to the partnership they had built, to the family they had raised. "I love you," she said simply, the words as true and deep as they had been 33 years earlier. "I love you too," Ryan replied. "Today, tomorrow, and always." They sat together in comfortable silence, two souls who had found each other against all odds, who had built a life of meaning and purpose, who had loved each other through every triumph and every trial. Emma closed her eyes and breathed in the scent of spring grass and wildflowers, listened to her grandchildren's laughter, felt Ryan's solid presence beside her. This was what happiness looked like, she thought. Not the glittering ballrooms of Philadelphia or the society life she had left behind. It was this porch, this ranch, this family, this man who had been her partner and her love for more than 3 decades. It was a life built on mutual respect and genuine affection, on shared work and shared dreams. And it had all started with one desperate morning, one difficult birth, one moment when Emma Sinclair had chosen to step forward and help a stranger in need. That single act of compassion had changed both their lives, had set them on a path that led to this perfect moment. As the sun set over the X-Bar Ranch, painting the Missouri hills in shades of amber and rose, Emma and Ryan sat together surrounded by the evidence of their love, their legacy spreading out before them in the form of children and grandchildren, cattle and horses, land and home. They had started with nothing but hope and determination, and they had built something beautiful. And when they finally rose to go inside for dinner, Ryan's arm around Emma's waist and her head on his shoulder, they moved as one, two people who had become something greater together than they ever could have been apart. Their story was one of love found in unexpected places, of courage and compassion, of partnership and perseverance. It was a story that would be told for generations, passed down through the family as the legend of how great-grandma Emma saved great-grandpa Ryan's whole season and found true love in a Missouri barn on a desperate April morning. And every time the story was told, the lesson remained the same. Sometimes the greatest loves begin with the simplest acts of kindness, and sometimes stepping forward when others step back is the bravest thing you can do. Emma and Ryan lived to see their golden wedding anniversary, celebrated by dozens of family members and friends who gathered to honor the couple who had become pillars of the Wyatt community. They lived to see their grandchildren grow and their great-grandchildren born. They lived to see the X-Bar Ranch become one of the most successful ranching operations in the state, a legacy that would continue through their descendants for generations to come. But more importantly, they lived every single day of those 50 years in love in partnership, in the kind of deep companionship that made even the hardest days bearable and the good days extraordinary. They proved that true love was not just romance and passion, though they had plenty of both. It was choosing each other, day after day, year after year. It was working side by side through drought and plenty, through illness and health, through every challenge life could throw at them. And when they were finally laid to rest, side by side in the cemetery overlooking the ranch they had built together, their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren stood together and remembered not just what they had accomplished, but how they had loved. They remembered the way Ryan looked at Emma even in their final years, as if she was still the brave young woman who had saved his cattle and stolen his heart. They remembered the way Emma touched Ryan's hand whenever he entered a room, a simple gesture that spoke of decades of affection and respect. The X-Bar Ranch continued to thrive under Robert's leadership, and then under his children, the bloodline started by miracles still strong and sought after. The schoolhouse Emma had built continued to educate children from all over the county. The values they had instilled, hard work, compassion, integrity, partnership, lived on in every member of their family. And sometimes, on quiet spring evenings when the light was just right, those who worked the ranch swore they could feel the presence of those who had come before, could sense Emma and Ryan walking the land they had loved, still together even in death as they had been in life. Their story became part of the fabric of Wyatt, Missouri, told and retold until it took on the quality of legend. But to those who had known them, who had witnessed their love firsthand, it was not legend but simple truth. Emma had helped a cow give birth when no vet came, and Ryan had told her she saved his whole season. But what had really happened was that two souls had found each other in the most unexpected way, had recognized in each other the partner they had been seeking, and had built a love that lasted not just a season but a lifetime and beyond. It was a reminder that the greatest stories often begin with the smallest acts of courage, that love can bloom in the most unlikely places, and that when two people commit to facing life together, they can accomplish extraordinary things. Emma and Ryan Xander had proven that, and their legacy, built on love and partnership and mutual respect, would endure for generations to come. The end.